first working reporter on the NASCAR beat joins us. That used to be a huge compliment back when there were quite a few reporters on the NASCAR beat. However, as it whittles down, he's still the first one there. He's still the last to leave. And he's still doing the job better than anybody else on the NASCAR beat. From ESPN for at least a few more months. But I have a feeling if us racing fans, promoters, track owners, if we bitch enough, maybe ESPN will reconsider. But right now, he is a free agent. It's Mr. Bob Pockris.
Thanks, Dennis.
All right, a little different on the intro here for you because I'm going to simply ask you, what was the coolest part of this season in NASCAR for you as a reporter?
The coolest part of the NASCAR season was seeing the three win the Daytona 500. I mean, if you've been around NASCAR long enough, it probably doesn't matter who's driving it. When the three wins the Daytona 500, that's hard to beat.
Very good. Let's have a round of applause, please. All right, Ralph, you're back again. I think this is going to be what we do from now on, since you now get credit for 8 years of service in only 7 years' time, being on a second panel. But again, it's one of the saviors of the national speed sport news brand. Mr. Ralph Shaheen, what was your favorite part of your racing season that you got to cover? I know, an unfair question because you covered so much.
Yeah, it really is. Gosh. I really can't pick one. There's just so many different things flashing through right now as I, started Indianapolis is always a highlight. 917s going around WeatherTech Raceway at Rensport this year, where it's just, I couldn't get enough of that. Supercross was spectacular, seeing the continued rise of flat track, and then another tremendous, you know what? Okay, I got to sit in the grandstands for the main event at Knoxville this year on Saturday night. I don't usually get to sit in the grandstands because I'm usually working some way. So sitting in the grandstands for the Knoxville Nationals, getting dirt all over myself off of turn 4 was the highlight.
Very cool indeed. A big round of applause for Ralph. All right, our next guest has worn many different hats within the sports world. His company, Score Shots. These guys are cool. You got to check this out. They've made looking cool on social media really easy, even for the novice. And their specialty templates are pretty cool, and I think they're going to really love the racing world. The president of Score Shots, Mr. Rick Perko, tell us what it's all about.
Well, one of the things I like to say is if you want to be taken seriously as a sports property, a sports business, a track, whatever element of racing you're in, you're now at a position where you've got to have some kind of engaging, visual, social media presence. If you don't, you're just going to go by way of the dinosaur or the internal combustion engine, as the case may be. So, our not yet. Or the iPhone 4. Yeah, the 4. So really what the tool does is it meets that demand. It allows people who don't have any particular skills like Lynn the ability to create really high quality social media posts, videos, motion graphics, images without knowing any of the tools. You don't have to know Photoshop or Illustrator. If you can type and click and drag, even on iPhone 4, you can make some cool stuff.
It's a 4S, doggone it.
Sorry.
All right, starting out as a newspaper journalist, our next panelist worked his way all the way up to the vice presidency at SEMA and a general manager of the performance racing industry. Now he's the chief of content at epartrade.com, a new digital platform that provides smart sourcing for the racing world. Welcome, Mr. John Kilroy.
Thank you, Dennis. I'll tell you briefly kind of what ePartrade is. The partners that started are Francis Sevignon and Judy Keene. And they called me up and said, John, we'd like to show you what we're doing here. And I had a picture in mind of what it was. And then when they showed me, I thought, oh my God, there's a lot of stuff we can do here. So basically, it's an online business community for the racing industry. And Francis took the whole world, our world of racing businesses, and put it all into a digital platform online at epartrade.com. So you have suppliers there and suppliers from around the world, and then you have buyers there as well. It's about 15,000 organizations. So that's the number one thing he started with was community. So he put this community online. The second thing he did was, because all the suppliers are pre-verified as being in the racing industry, and they make parts that can survive a racing application, and the buyers too are pre-verified as being in the racing trade. So the buyers shopping for parts know that they get a complete set of options for their parts. So it's smart sourcing, because you kind of cut through all the crap on the internet and get right to the solutions to your problems. One thing I've said is that when you Google pistons, because you want pistons, you get a 6'8" guy who can shoot 3-pointers all night long. And most everybody here, that's not what they want. And then the final thing is that there's places on the platform where you can request more information. You can talk to each other through the platform, and then as you're talking to each other through the platform, you know that you're talking to somebody who's serious about this business. And we have everybody sign in, so it's like getting a credential for a trade show, and that's what we're doing. So it's probably the newest company in this building, but it's got a lot of potential.
Big round of applause.
Thank you.
Our final panelist has also worn many hats in the journalism world. Now he is the editor of the Performance Racing Industry magazine, still an awesome publication, and found in more race shop bathrooms than just about any other than park catalogs. It's Dan Schechner.
So thank you for having me, Dennis, and I appreciate it. And you know, it's such a great topic, and it's something that, you know, I think all of us up here on this panel have devoted a good portion of our lives to. And you know, when we talked about this, and Dennis, you'll recall, you know, we talked about content and we talked about media, and I think what's important to realize today is that it's such a moving target, and the rules that applied 20, 30 years ago when a lot of us got started really don't apply anymore. You kind of have to throw them out the window. And you know, with all of the you know, there's new media, there's traditional media, and I think the one you know, point that I'd like to make, and I'll, you know, elaborate on it later, is that much as we all have strategies when it comes to marketing or our businesses, we need to have a media strategy as well. And I want to just plant that seed, and we can talk about it a little more in depth. But I think that it's one of those elements that maybe not everybody considers, you know, is having that strategy when it comes to media. And so, you know, I'm sure you'll hear a lot about that today, and it's something that I'm looking forward to contributing to. So.
Round of applause for Dan. All right, Rick, I'm going to toss this question out to you, but then each one of our panelists I want to comment, because they're all involved in this, because as I've understood, technology is always changing. 4S isn't working. How are changes in technology changing the way we deliver our product to our customers? We'll start with you, Rick.
Well, there's a lot of ways you could go back a handful of years. I would say that if you look at the last couple of years, it's been a pretty significant transformation into the consumption of information through social media as a sole source of information by a lot of people who are certainly 30 and younger, and probably even moves up for a lot of people up to the age of 40. And so because technology has allowed that, the consumption habits have completely changed. So a little bit like Ralph, I've got two teenage daughters, a little bit older, 17 and 19. They don't read the newspaper. They don't watch television. The only thing that they've watched on appointment television this year is probably the Royals' wedding and maybe the Super Bowl. I mean, that literally is it. They get their information simply through Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Snapchat's having some problems. I don't know where that's going to go. If it doesn't happen there, it didn't happen in their lives. And so one of the technology pieces that makes that possible as well in the last couple of years is because the technology has improved for video. Now video is playing pretty clearly on phones. You don't really have too many issues. A lot of facilities are now wired, so you can get internet there. So as the software and the hardware continue to grow, it becomes more and more ubiquitous. And I guess I would say that's probably the most significant thing that I've seen.
Ralph, you guys have done a great job with the website of understanding the difference. You got the magazine, you got the website, you got the online shows, for lack of a better description, plus the MAV TV content. How has technology driven that change in your business model?
I think one of the biggest changes is how we produce some of that. I mean, you can go out now with your phone like she's doing right here, and you can basically shoot a whole show on your phone, and it's going to look as good as what you would have done with a big old clunky TV camera. Yours actually probably looks better, and you can do a lot more with it. So all of that technology has allowed us to drive costs down, and allowed us to go to places and produce content, whether it's a little piece, a bigger feature piece, or a whole race, in a lot more cost-effective way than we ever could before. I mean, that's really the whole theory behind our Suzuki Presents Speed Sports shows, that we're able to do 26 national television shows from smaller second-tier racetracks that never would have had a national TV show before.
Very cool indeed. Dan, how is that changing? I mean, we think of the PRI magazine, and we still love it, but technology is even changing the way you get your product done and how you communicate with your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that I like to look at it is it's so much more science than it ever was in the past. And what I mean is we have data at our disposal now. We can look at analytics, and let's say you go online and you read an article in the online version of our magazine. We know how you got there. We know who you are. We know how long you've been on that article. We know what you had for lunch that day. No, we don't know that. But we know a lot. And that's the idea, is that by gathering that information, we're much better able to track who our readers are, what your interests are, and that helps us not only build content better, but deliver it more effectively. So we know how many people are going to those articles through social media. We know how many are getting there through a Google search. We know how many are getting there through our e-newsletter, and so forth and so on. So it helps us in that way, in that we're so much better able to discern who our readers are, where they're coming from, and we can tailor our message and how we make that message available to them.
Okay, can I build on that for a minute? When I worked at the Sporting News, I guess it's 4 or 5 years ago, when Dale Earnhardt Jr. breaks his winless streak at Michigan, and he gets a big hug from Amy in Victory Lane, and this is a time when a lot of people didn't know who Amy was. About 20 minutes after that race, I got a call from the social or analytics editor at the Sporting News who said, search for Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s girlfriend has spiked of people coming to our site. Is there any way to get a quote from her for the story? And, sure, texted Dale Jr.'s people, they texted a quote back, and it actually dictated what we were writing about.
And Bob, I know from covering the NASCAR beat since the late 90s, I used to tail. I was a stalker, I admit. I used to keep an eye on the best reporters in the business, because what haulers they went into were where the stories were coming from. Now I see some guys at the media center that they don't leave their desk all day. It really is, technology has evolved the way we even cover an event when we're there.
Well, absolutely, because in some ways you don't need to go in the hauler, because if that driver wants to say something, that driver can dictate the message by posting on their social media stuff. I mean, Richard Childress was surprised when Ryan Newman announced he was leaving from Richard Childress Racing, and Newman didn't have to send out a press release or call any reporters. He just had to post it on Instagram and Twitter.
That's incredible. And while nothing is going to replace the trade show deal, because we get a chance to get together every year and talk in ways that we don't take the time to during the year, technology is really going to change the way we utilize the information we gain here today. And John, I think you guys over at ePark Trade are going to be a big part of that.
Well, it just makes sense, and there's been a hole in the internet ever since it was invented, where kind of our group here, we never really had a place to hang out online in a really profound way. And so that's what we're doing at ePark Trade. And it's just a way to bring everybody together, let them communicate with each other, solve the problems that we're facing here. And then one of the ways I think that media has changed, I've kind of watched the whole revolution from print to digital, is that at one point half of all the marketing people took half their budget and started just spending it on their own website. And I just want to leave you with kind of a note about that I think your own website does a really good job of talking to the people who know you and the people who follow you, and so does your social media. But you're a very important group in terms of the future of the racing industry. And I think we all need to always remember to be talking to people who don't know about us, who don't know about the racing industry, don't know how fun their local short track is. And so I would just kind of suggest that you go outside your little world of media, because you're all kind of publishers right now, and find other places to get the message out. And that's a service that ePark Trade provides. And we have a place where people can find suppliers, and they may not have heard of a supplier before. They may not have known of the full depth and breadth of the product line. But ePark Trade will present that and do that job for you apart from your own website.
Dennis, two little things there that came up in my mind as you were going through all that. The first bit is off of what all this technology allows everybody to do. One thing it does is it allows everybody to be a reporter. You got a phone, everybody's a reporter. However, not everybody's a journalist. And there's a huge difference there, right? So keep that in mind for one. Sometimes a big problem you have with things like social media and everybody's running around, making statements and grabbing pictures and everything, but it's not necessarily journalistically sound. So you still need a journalist over here, hopefully over here, to tell the real story properly. The other thing that comes off of that is to what John is talking about there too. Everybody thinks that, well, I've got a Twitter account, so I can tell everybody about my business. Yeah, you can. But sometimes you can't tell the story of yourself as good as we can. So that's something to keep in mind too. When you go to market yourself and your business or your track or your racer or whatever it might be, don't just think because you sent out a tweet about what you did that it really has the impact that you're trying to get. Sometimes when you sent that tweet out, you're just talking to the same people that saw the last 10 tweets you sent out. What you really need is a stronger impact that comes from a very solid journalistic side.
On the other hand, one of the things that's really nice about social media is you don't have that filter. And you do control your message, and it can say what you want it to. You certainly hire somebody to do some writing for you, but you control the message. Everybody in this room, everybody in the sports industry that we work with, and a lot of those we don't work with, it's the industry has changed, and you control your own message now. You look at the number of followers, say for example in NASCAR drivers. Look at the number of followers that NASCAR has as an entity, for example, in any of the platforms. Then compare that to the number of followers a particular driver has or a particular team has, and you'll continue to see those scales change. I think, for example, NASCAR will always have a really strong social media presence. It has about 7 million followers on Facebook, about 3 million in Twitter, I think about 1 million on Instagram. So I think what you'll continue to see, though, is drivers and teams, as those numbers may flatten a little bit, you may see drivers and teams continue to rise because it's not filtered. Obviously, a ton of value in what Ralph is saying here, but there's a balance point there, too. The other thing that I would just mention real quickly about websites, and we're seeing this certainly in part of our business, especially in college sports, websites are increasingly less valuable, less a source of information than they used to be. It's tricky, and some people don't like to hear that, but are people reading a lot of long-form articles on websites? Not as much as they used to. They want information in little bites, something they can digest in a 30-second video, a couple of paragraphs of writing, an image that's being posted. So websites are becoming, and again, I'm not talking about the racing industry. I don't know it as well, but if you look at college sports, for example, it's becoming more of a business hub. Where do you want to buy your tickets, right? What kind of merchandise do you want to purchase? How do you want to access a social media account? It's becoming more of a hub and less as sort of an information source than it has been. That's a trend that's going to take a little while more to figure out. But if you see a decline in your traffic to your website, that can easily be offset by an increase in social media or other ways of getting your information out.
In the 20 years I've been covering motorsports, I've seen it go from having a few contacts that would feed you some stories to doing a lot of cold calling and, getting people on the line to get the story, to PR releases becoming the main thing. Now, especially in the higher level motorsports, I see a tweet and I see 20 articles about a tweet. I'm throwing this out there as a toss-up question. Has the changing landscape of motorsports media, the way drivers and teams and series can control the story by social media, is that in the end good or bad for the racing fans?
I could jump on that one. I think it depends, and I realize that's like a cop-out answer, but I think that what's important to understand, and it probably applies to all of us to a certain extent, is that it's really important to know your audience. And I think that if what you're putting out there is engaging to your audience, then it's going to be effective. The biggest shame is when I get contacted by companies that really don't know what we do. And I have to very artfully say, thank you, but not interested. And I think that that's one of the fatal flaws that a lot of people make, is they don't know the audience. They don't know our audience, or they don't know Ralph's audience, or they don't know who it is the media outlet is connected to. And I would put forth that as like a key point, if you could take something, is know your audience and play to your strength. I was a part of a panel about 6 months ago on this very topic, and a guy got up and he said, I'm trying to get some publicity for my company, but I'm not a good writer, and I don't really do press releases very well. And we said, well, tell us your story. And he told us his story, and a phenomenal story about how he came from nothing and started this business, and it was like a beautiful made-for-TV story. And that was basically, it was like, look, you're the story. So get somebody to put a camera on you, talk about how you got into this. Your medium is not print, it's video. So go make a video and send it to people. And you know what? We've got a website that can help you with that. We've got Facebook pages. We've got, again, all those different channels that can be really effective for you that are now out in the public domain. So I realize it gets a little off track of your original question, but I think it's very important to understand that regardless of who you are and what your strength may be, play to your strength, because there's probably an opportunity for you there.
One other observation on that is that question, or the answer to the question, has multiple layers to it. One of the things I think that's across the board would be a truth is that it's increased competition. So, and if that forces all of us to do our job a little bit better, work a little bit harder, be a little bit more fine-tuned in what we do, I think that's a good thing. We are, in some ways, because we're technology-based, people might think of us as being maybe toward the leading edge of some of this, but every single week we take a step back and say, what's new, who's doing what, how does this challenge what we're doing, are there new tools, is there a new piece of software, what's happening in the world right now, today, that's going to affect the way that people are receiving information, digesting it, understanding it, commenting on it tomorrow. So we don't have a choice. If we don't do that, then we're done.
Bob, I wanted to talk about knowing your audience, and I wouldn't say that sometimes we know the audience better than you do, but let me use an example. One of the biggest stories on ESPN.com this year was South Boston Speedway and the dad running out on the track to pull his kid out of the car, and he's there in t-shirt and shorts, right? And then all of a sudden, it's going all over social media. Oh, they've suspended the dad, yada yada yada, and finally, we got host of Mike at the track, and he said, no, we haven't suspended him, but, we did discipline him a little bit, make sure they understood. But one of the things I don't think they realized at first was that people saw the video, and they were like, gosh, it took forever for the rescue crew to get there. Well, if you've been to South Boston, you know that where the rescue crew is located. They're located, I want to say, turn 2. So it took them a little bit to get around. I mean, just the way is configured. And anybody who works or is at South Boston kind of knows that, but not everybody's been to South Boston. So it takes somebody like me, if I can explain that to people, at least it helps put the response into a little bit of context.
And I'd just like to add that on behalf of the racing industry, I think drivers just tell a small part of the story. They tell their story. So it's really complicated to go racing, and there's a race car, and there's racetrack owners and promoters, and there's a lot going on to have a successful race team. And I think that the racing business has to be careful about just being all about drivers. For decades, the car was a big part of the mystery of how do you win a race. And you had the Indy 500 in the old days. As people arrived with their car for the Indy 500, that was big news. So May 1st is like, what do they have? What's coming off the trailer? And we don't want to start losing really important parts of the story, important parts of the drama, just because the driver can tweet, but the car can't.
If you can teach me to interview a tire or a wheel or an engine, I would love it, because it's one of the most difficult parts of our job is that we can't explain why cars go fast. No crew chief is going to tell me why their car goes fast. And I can't interview a suspension piece like, hey, were you on your game today? And so that's, people say, oh, well, you guys all focus on the negative or on the drama. Well, football, I can see how fast a guy runs. But, heck, you ask other competitors, they don't know why sometimes they're getting beat. So it's really, really hard for us to explain it.
Yeah, I agree. And it goes along with the story also of kind of spec cars and everything. And if every car is the same, it becomes really hard to tell what's different there.
What we see at Speed Sport in Sprint Car and Midget is the fact that something will break on social media. This happened at this event. This driver got hired, got fired, whatever it is. So the announcement is out there of that moment, whatever that moment is, good, bad, or indifferent. But then as soon as that is out there, they come rushing to us to find out what really happened. They want the real story. They want the analysis. They want the breakdown. They want the what does this mean? So that's, again, where the journalist part comes back in. That it's no different than any stick and ball sport too, right? You see a big game and a guy scores the winning shot, or a coach gets fired, and everybody goes rushing to ESPN or whatever, Fox Sports, whatever your favorite is, whether it's the TV side or the website side, to hear from all the former players about what it means that this coach got fired. So just because something got tweeted out, it still has to get covered.
Just one observation. I couldn't agree more. I think that the context you can provide as a media entity is going to ultimately be really powerful for the audience you're talking to. One of the questions I would have for the group, I did some research before I came here, and I think it's an open question, at least in my mind, is, what is that audience? How does it segment for your publications or for your news entity? Does it index as 40 and older, for example? And is that where you still get a lot of your punch? So then the question becomes, what are you doing to grow the next generation of fans? What are the teens doing? What are the 20-somethings doing, the 30-somethings doing? Are they going to be the people reading these longer form stories that are super interesting and really compelling and put things in context? The answer in a lot of stick and ball sports is they're not. They're not reading that. They're finding, and so a lot of times the true answer is they're losing context. They don't have it. They have to sort of get it from multiple sources. So I don't know for sure, based on what I've read, whether there's some risk in the racing industry of not addressing that next, not just the next generation of fans, but maybe even the next one after that.
See, to that point, one of the things I would say is, like, at Speed Sport, everybody thinks of us as a newspaper. They stopped printing the newspaper years ago. Yeah, we got 2 magazines, but we're a media company. So not everything we do is written word. A lot of it is digital, it's video, it's television, it's branded content. There's a lot of different ways of telling the story. So it's not just about, I should put it this way, it's about telling the story. It's not necessarily the platform that you utilize to tell the story. You have to tell the story across a wide variety of platforms so that your word really gets out. I feel like if we were just the magazines, we probably wouldn't survive right now, because everybody is absorbing that material in such a wide variety of ways. So you have to be able to deliver it in a variety of ways.
And
Still makes a fantastic stocking stuffer. Speedsport.com. Get your subscriptions to both publications right now.
But we own the bathrooms of every race shop, so just remember that. Don't step on our
I've done
territory.
surveys over the years.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point, and I would agree with what you're saying, that it's very important to have that, that placing it into context and go in and get that extra, kind of push. So.
All right, guys, I'm going to ask you one more last unfair question before we wrap it up. That's the difference between a question asker and a journalist, by the way. What do you see for the future of motorsports? Where is this industry going? Are we going to have great times ahead? Are we going to have some issues? What is the future of motorsports? I'm going to start right here.
All righty. So I think the future of motorsports is, there's an old adage in journalism, is what I was going to say, is that it's a fight between, do we give them what they need or do we give them what they want? And there's always going to be that conflict between providing content that people want and that we know that they need. And I think that it's going to be a combination of both of those. And I think that the way that we're going to get to the want is, like I was saying before about analytics. It's looking at data, because people will tell you what they want, right? If you look at social media, they're going to tell you what they want because it's going to have 5,000 likes on it. If you go to Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, all that kind of stuff, it's going to tell you where the eyeballs are. You're going to have to balance that with, again, giving them information that they need in order to, if it's a business publication like ours, make their business more successful. We were talking, the SEMA group, and we were talking amongst ourselves several months ago, and there was a question as to, do car clubs still exist anymore? What's happened to car clubs? They don't get together anymore like they used to. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, not like they used to, but they still get together. Maybe it's in a virtual community. Maybe it's in a different way. It looks different, but there's still that interest. And I think that if you can feed that interest, and you can, again, go where your audience is and give them what they want, and give them what they need and marry the two, I think you'll be successful. I think the desire is still out there and always will be. There'll always be a fascination with horsepower and racing and motorsports. I just think it's a matter of being smart about how you present it.
Rick, unfair question for you perhaps because you're more the stick and ball sports guy, but you've had quite an exposure to us.
Well, yeah, and actually I'm going to sound like a Luddite here for a minute. You'll know what that means, Dennis. So in a previous session, you referred to the young woman, I think she's wearing turquoise glasses or was. I'm not sure if that's who said it was about people. And I'm going to sound like that because I still think...
My name is Lynn St. James.
The young Lynn St. James.
I think the glasses are green, right?
I think turquoise.
Okay. All right.
But I think that comment really struck me because I think there's still so much power and passion in stories about people and the way that people drive things. And then it becomes a question of how do you share that and how do people consume that? And that's changing. But and maybe I am sounding too much like a Luddite or too old-fashioned with the business that I'm in. But I think some continued focus on the people who are involved, and not necessarily just the drivers, but it could be the team owners, the guys in the shop, whatever it is. I love those stories. Those stories can still be told really effectively with social media, but just in a different way.
Bob.
Well, I think it kind of sums up the whole day. I mean, in some ways, some of the panelists were talking. I can't tell you where the auto industry is going to be 5 years from now, so how am I supposed to tell you where the motorsports industry is going to be 5 years from now? But the way I see it, I don't view motorsports as having a racing problem. I view what you talk about is that they have a passion problem. And what you need to do is easy for me, I get to spend people's money that I don't have and give suggestions, right? But the key is finding what works for you as far as the passion. Butler Speedway in Michigan, it seems like the place where people just go on the Friday night or Saturday night. It's part of that community. So as long as they can keep the ties to that community, it may not matter about the product on the track. For others, it may matter more. And it's just it has to be about what the people in your area what's going to drive that passion. And from what I can tell, if I look at the Xfinity Series championship race from a couple of weeks ago, and Tyler Reddick riding up against the wall to win that championship, I felt like he made a difference. And I think that's what, if you're looking at stuff on the track, I want to know that the driver made a difference, that the crew chief made a difference, and it wasn't somebody who looked like me in the corner of Hendrick Motorsports developing a piece that made the difference.
John.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I think we should just have faith. So being entrepreneurs and trying to make a buck in this business is hard. It's always been hard. When I got into this business as a journalist, one of the first phone calls I got was the racing business is about to go out of business and there won't be a racing industry anymore because it's way too expensive. And I got all excited about that, and I thought I had a story, and I ran into Steve Lewis. I said, Steve, I just got the phone, and I think I got a big story for you. And Steve, who spent a lot of money on racing parts, said, let's just wait on that. So that was about 30 years ago. So you have to remember that there's an extraordinary quality of people in the racing business right now. And we all have our fears, but at the same time, we're all trying to figure out how to take it up a notch. And I think that's just the best we can do. I think we have a product. If you go to a short track, that's the best entertainment buck for your money, period. So in terms of drama, in terms of noise, in terms of excitement, in terms of just all hell breaking loose, it's the best. You don't have a better buy for your buck anywhere. And we just have to realize that people are finding little places that I think this can be done better. And when Francisque and Judy kind of saw the opportunity for e-part trade, that's what they're looking at. They're saying, like, we love the PRI show, we love the SEMA show, they'll be around forever. But that's 7 days, and people are introducing new racing products every week. And so e-part trade is kind of the trade show experience year-round, 365 days out of the year, but we don't have things like St. Elmo. So it's not a duplicate of the trade show experience. I can't say that. But the idea of new product information being available year-round is really what ePart Trade is all about.
Ralph.
You know, I was thinking about this. It was going down the line here, and you'd asked me earlier about what was the highlights of that I saw this year, and I got to thinking about it a little bit. And you know, there's so much, like John was kind of saying, there's always this doom and gloom hanging over the fact when we all walk in here and sit down at RTBC of, you know, technology. Are we going to be around? Is this going to work? You know what? Knoxville Nationals was huge this year. Chili Bowl was off the charts, massive crowd. I was at the World Finals. It was packed every night for 4 nights. I was at Rensport and Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion. Huge crowds. Monterey Car Week was massive. The Indy 500 was massive again this year. Every single one of those events is different. And they're all good. They're all successful. Sure, there's other things that are maybe struggling. There always has been. Always will be. One thing I can tell you is technology is coming in. Yep. We are entering an information age in a huge way. We went through the agricultural period, the industrial age. We are walking headfirst quickly into the information age as a country, as a society. That's where this world is headed. So our events are fine. There's some great events out there, and technology's okay. You just have to be flexible, figure out how you're going to dance around it. The last thing I would tell you is that Speed Sport in 2019 is going to be 85 years old. We've been doing journalism for 85 years, and we're going to continue to do it for another 85 years. How you get our journalism might change a little bit. There might be some things coming that we don't even know about. My guess is probably pretty quickly. But somewhere in there is going to be Speed Sport giving you journalism.
I cannot top that, so I'm not even going to try. All I'm going to tell you is what we took away from this panel today. And yes, technology is driving the changes, but journalists are still going to be important to tell that story in exciting ways. Also, check out and use the new entities. Try Score Shots. Check out ePart Trade. But don't use those things to replace other things. Keep using the PRI magazine. Keep depending on journalists like Bob Pockrass. And, of course, keep showing your support and love for Speed Sport. And also, finally, understand who you're trying to reach. Know your audience. If you don't know your audience, how do you even come close to knowing how to reach them? One big round of applause for our media and communications group. Stay put here for just a minute, guys. Mr. Tim Frost, before I close things out, I want to give you a last chance to address the crowd, please.
Another one for the books. Wow. 7 years. Thanks very much for everybody for it. All our panelists, all our attendees, our sponsors, our spouses, and our industry for this. Special shout out goes to Mr. Dennis for that. And Miss Jan over there, I can guarantee you she has taken your picture. This event couldn't happen without you. Couldn't happen without PRI playing our host for doing this. So we're all energized. We got some great ideas. We're going to go forward to the 2019 season. I will be following up with materials, some emails. We've made some mistakes. We get some bumps in the road, but that's the nature of racing, as we know. So, anyways, thank you very much. We've got drinks that are getting fired up from our friends, sports insurance specialists. So we will see you next year, same place, same time.
And my final thoughts for the day, folks. This educational adventure is fantastic, and it gets better every year because of your input. Last year, you guys told me I needed to move up my sock game. I did it. Oh, I'm just kidding. No, please give us suggestions for how we can make this show better for you. Also, this educational experience just gets the ball rolling, And I want to thank our sponsors. For breakfast, Smith Fence. Our morning break, EPAR Trade. Lunch, Race Monitor. Our reception, Jeff Ladd from Sports Insurance Specialists. Also on your lanyards, myracepass.com. Audio, Dave Dusick and the gang, thank you so much for your help. Social media partner, Rick Perko with Score Shots. Our media partners, Speed Sport and Black Book Forum. Our educational partners, Sports Management Worldwide. Let's get some of that lubrication, and thank you very much for coming.